Now, Croesus decided to ally with Sparta and sends messages to Sparta bearing gifts with the following message. So to quote Herodotus, Croesus, king of the Lydians and other people, sent us here with this message. Lacedaemonians, the god's oracle told me to acquire the Hellene as friend and supporter. You, I have learned, are the leaders of Hellas, and so I invite you to comply with the oracle. I am eager to become your friend and military ally without treachery or guile. The Spartans were pleased that Croesus was asking for a military alliance with them and agreed. So after confirming, the Spartan alliance, Croesus then prepares to invade Cappadocia as it was currently a Persian-occupied territory. However, before the invasion, Croesus is advised against the invasion by a sage named Sardis, because the Persians who ruled Cappadocia at the time were poor. So to quote Sardis, Sire, he said, you are preparing for war against the sort of men who wear leather trousers and leather for all their other garments as well. They eat not as much as they want, but as much as they have, since their land is rugged. Moreover, they have no wine, but drink water instead. They have no figs for dessert, nor anything else good to eat. Now if you should conquer them, what will you take from these people who have nothing at all? And then again, if they were to conquer you, think of how much you will lose. As soon as they taste our good life, they will never give it up, and you will never get rid of them. I, for my part, give it thanks to the gods for not putting it into the minds of the Persians to make war on the Lydians. However, Croesus didn't heed the advice of Sardis and still decides to invade Cappadocia, and these are the reasons that he gives. So to increase his dominion, so to expand the Lydian Empire, and he also believed, as we discussed in the previous video, that the oracle predicted victory for him. However, there was a third reason Croesus decided to invade Cappadocia and to fight against the Persians. And the third reason we're given is Croesus wanted to punish Cyrus, the king of the Persians, for what he had done to Astyages, who was the king of the Medes, before being conquered by Cyrus, as he just so happened to be Croesus' brother-in-law. The story of how the Persians conquered the Medes is told in greater detail later on. However, Herodotus here explains how Croesus and Astyages became brother-in-law. So the Lydians and the Medes were warring for 5 years, when on the 6th year of battle, on May 28, 585 BC, and I'll explain a little bit later on why we know that exact date, Herodotus says during a battle, suddenly day turned into night. So all of a sudden, it became dark during the day. We're told after this happened, they stopped fighting and made peace. Astyages, the king of the Medes at the time, and the father of Cyaxares, and Aleates, the king of the Lydians at the time, and father of Croesus, married off 2 of their kids. And that's how Croesus and Cyaxares became brother-in-law. Now, how do we know the exact date of the battle, and what happened in which all of a sudden the day turned into night? Well, scientists have confirmed that on May 28, 585 BC, there was a solar eclipse. And this is one thing we can confirm to be true, which is very rare in ancient history, which is a great luxury. But now returning to the story. Croesus crossed the river Halys and arrived to the city of Petraea, and this is where he had his battle with Cyrus, which was indecisive, with neither the Lydians or the Persians getting the upper hand. Croesus thought the reason he wasn't able to get the upper hand against Cyrus was due not to having a big enough army. So he decided to return to Sardis and summon his allies, which were the Spartans, the Egyptians, and the Babylonians. However, while Croesus was returning from Petraea, Cyrus caught Croesus completely off guard and went after the Lydians. So to quote Herodotus, Croesus thus suddenly found himself in great difficulty, as events had turned out quite to the contrary of what he had expected. Nevertheless, he led the Lydian army out to battle, for at that time, of all the peoples of Asia, none had more bravery and strength in battle than the Lydians. They fought on horseback, wielding long spears, and were excellent riders. Now, an interesting footnote after that quote that comes in the landmark Herodotus, as I mentioned in my first video, which is the translation I'm reading, says that the Hellenes believed that after the Lydians lost their freedom, they became cowardly, effeminate, and devoted to pleasure and luxury. However, during the battle, the Persian camels, we're told, scared the Lydian horses, and the Lydians fled and took refuge behind the walls of Sardis. Now, sieges of these massive cities would traditionally last a very long time, so Croesus, believing he had time, sent messages to his allies to hurry and get down there because I'm in trouble. So this was all going on when the herald from Lydia came to Sparta to request their assistance against the Persians. And just as their ships were ready to set sail, they heard news that Sardis had been taken and Croesus was being held captive. Herodotus then explains how the Persians had captured Sardis. Cyrus sent around to all his horsemen and announced he would give an award to the first man to scale the walls of Sardis. And a Persian discovered a part of the Acropolis of Sardis that was not guarded, believing it was impenetrable. However, he had seen a Lydian climb it the day before, remembered the path he took, and followed his footsteps up. With other Persians following behind, therefore, the Acropolis of Sardis was taken, and consequently, the city was sacked. Now here I'll quote the historian Tom Hollands. But this time there was no solar eclipse, and no end to the war. Instead, with winter drawing on, Croesus withdrew to his capital, Sardis, never imagining that Cyrus would dare to follow him, for the city was so far to the west that the Aegean lay only 3 days' journey beyond it, a tremendous distance from the Median frontier. But the Persians did not retreat. Instead, braving the bitter cold, they shadowed Croesus, never alerting him to their presence, allowing him time to dismiss his allies, lurking and waiting for his conscripts to melt away. Then, with Sardis denuded, Cyrus struck. Frantically, Croesus cobbled together what few troops remained. A desperate battle, with the Lydians staking everything on a final cavalry charge, and then the storming of Sardis, and the capture of Croesus himself. For in the space of just 6 years, the Persians, so small in numbers, once so backward and obscure, had made their kingdom the greatest power in the world. The Spartans, when they were told by Croesus to come to Sardis, were at that time in conflict with the Argives over some land. The Spartans made an agreement with the Argives that 300 men from each side would fight it out in a battle which is now known as the Battle of Champions in 546 BC, and whichever side prevailed would keep the land. The two sides that fought were so evenly matched that finally, at nightfall, only 3 men remained, 2 Argives and 1 Spartan. Both sides were able to claim victory, the Argives because more of their champions had survived, the Spartans because their single champion held the field. Argos did not take too kindly to Spartans claiming victory, and sent their entire hoplite army, which was met by a Spartan force of equal magnitude. The Spartans won a decisive victory, and as a result gained control of the land. Now, interestingly, years later in 420 BC during the Peloponnesian War, Argos challenged Sparta to a rematch, which we're told Sparta declined. But here again I want to quote the historian Tom Hollands in his book Persian Fire. By the early 540s BC, when Croesus, the king of Lydia, was advised by an oracle to seek out the most powerful of the Greek cities as an ally in his looming war against the Persians, he had little hesitation in approaching Sparta. No greater tribute to her prestige could have been paid, nor a mere direct snub to Argos. Indeed, with the friendship of a king as rich and as powerful as Croesus, and with Tegea and much of the rest of the Peloponnese subordinated, it appeared to the Spartans that the time had finally come for a reckoning with the old enemy. Around 546 BC, even as the Lydian Empire was succumbing to Cyrus, the Spartans advanced, not to the aid of Croesus, as they were bound to do by the terms of their alliance, but directly against Argos. The Argives, harking back to an earlier age, immediately proposed a tournament, a clash between 300 champions from their own city and 300 of the invaders. The Spartans, ever enthusiasts for the example provided by tales of ancient heroism, agreed. At the end of the day, 3 men were left standing, 2 Argives and a solitary Spartan. The Argives, believing themselves the victors, dully returned to their city in triumph, leaving their adversary blood-drenched but still very much alive, to accuse them of abandoning the battlefield and to claim the triumph for himself. When the Argives disputed this, when the Spartans disputed this in tones of high indignation, the Spartans' countrymen were there to back their champion up, meeting the enemy the next day with the full complement of their invasion force. They won a crushing victory. Strategically vital swaths of the Argive frontier were permanently annexed to the Lacedaemonian. The Argives themselves, shaving their heads as a mark of their prostration, were left crippled for a generation. Even as the shears were getting to work in Argos, the Spartans were taking a precisely opposite vow. They would grow their hair long evermore and wear oiled dresses, like red cloaks, as a mark of who they were. And as I mentioned previously, that's an excerpt from Persian Fire by Tom Hollands.